I remember that evening with perfect clarity, as if it were frozen in time and replayed in slow motion whenever I closed my eyes. It was a Friday in late September, the kind of night where the air carried a crisp chill and the leaves had turned brilliant shades of amber and gold. The restaurant my parents chose was one of those upscale establishments in downtown Chicago, the kind with valet parking, cloth napkins folded into swans, and a wine list thicker than most novels. I, Daniel Whitfield, 34 years old, arrived exactly on time wearing a simple navy blazer and khakis. No designer labels. No luxury watch catching the candlelight. Nothing to draw attention or spark questions I wasn't ready to answer. The hostess led me through the dining room, where crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables filled with Chicago's elite. Business executives, lawyers, doctors, people who measured success in titles and stock portfolios. My family was already seated at a corner table with a view overlooking the city skyline. My father, Robert Whitfield, sat at the head wearing an expensive charcoal suit, his silver hair perfectly styled, his posture radiating authority. He had built Whitfield Capital from the ground up, turning it into one of the most respected investment firms in the Midwest. The family estate sat in the exclusive Kenilworth neighborhood, a sprawling property my parents had owned for 25 years. My mother, Catherine, sat beside him in a designer dress, pearls gleaming at her throat. She smiled when she saw me, but it was the kind of smile that never quite reached her eyes anymore. And then there was my older brother, Jonathan Whitfield, 36 years old, impeccably dressed in a custom-tailored suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. His Patek Philippe watch gleamed as he raised his glass of scotch. Jonathan was the golden child, the heir apparent, the son who had followed our father into the family business and exceeded every expectation. The media called him a prodigy. Forbes had featured him in their 30 under 30 list years ago. He sat at the table like a king holding court, confident and completely at ease. I slid into my seat and ordered water. "Just water?" Jonathan asked, eyebrow raised. "Come on, little brother. Live a little." "I'm fine," I said quietly. The waiter brought menus, and conversation flowed easily around me. My parents asked Jonathan about his latest acquisition, a commercial real estate portfolio worth $40 million. He described the deal with practiced ease, dropping names of prominent investors and venture capitalists like they were old college friends. My father beamed with pride. "That's my son, always thinking 3 moves ahead." My mother nodded enthusiastically. "We're so proud of you, Jonathan. You've made the Whitfield name mean something in this city." I sat there silently, scanning the menu, already knowing what would come next. "So, Daniel," my father said, turning his attention to me, "what have you been up to lately?" "Still doing that freelance work." The way he said freelance made it sound like a euphemism for unemployed. "Consulting," I corrected gently. "I've been working with a few different clients." Jonathan chuckled. "Consulting. That's what people call it when they can't hold down a real job." A few nearby diners glanced our way. My mother's smile tightened. "Jonathan, don't be rude," she said, but her tone carried no real conviction. My father waved his hand dismissively. "I'm just saying, Daniel, at your age, you should have a career by now. Something stable. Something with a future. Your brother was already running divisions at your age," my mother added. "Maybe it's time to consider coming to work at Whitfield Capital. We could find something for you. Entry level, of course, but it's a start." Entry level. Those words landed like a slap across the face. I was 34 years old with a master's degree in economics and years of experience building something they couldn't even comprehend. What they didn't know, what nobody at that table knew, was that I wasn't struggling. I wasn't drifting. I wasn't some failure desperately searching for direction. I was the founder and CEO of Apex Global Ventures, a private equity firm with assets under management exceeding $420 million. I had holdings in renewable energy, artificial intelligence startups, biotechnology, and sustainable infrastructure across 3 continents. I had built an empire in silence, deliberately keeping my identity hidden behind layers of corporate structures and proxy representatives. I used my middle name, Carter, in all business dealings. I attended conferences remotely, I signed documents through encrypted channels. Legal proxy officers were listed as the principals of record in every filing. For years, I had operated in the shadows, not out of shame, but because I wanted to prove something to myself. I wanted to know that I could succeed without the Whitfield name opening doors, without my father's connections greasing wheels, without the safety net that had always cushioned Jonathan's every move. I had started with $50,000 saved from summer internships and part-time jobs during college. No family money, no seed investment from Whitfield Capital, just relentless focus, calculated risks, and sleepless nights in a cramped studio apartment analyzing market trends and cold-calling potential investors. I graduated at 22 and spent a year working corporate jobs while building my savings. At 23, I registered Apex Global Ventures and made my first investment. My first major success came from identifying an undervalued green energy startup in Minnesota. I invested everything I had, and when they were acquired 18 months later, I walked away with $3 million. From there, I built carefully, methodically, always staying below the radar. It had been 11 years since I registered the company, though it took those first 2 years before I made my breakthrough investment. But sitting at that table, watching my family dismiss me as incompetent, something shifted inside me. "Daniel, are you even listening?" my father asked, irritation creeping into his voice. "Yes," I said. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm fine where I am." Jonathan leaned back in his chair, swirling his scotch. "Fine. Little brother, you're 34 and living in a modest apartment. No career. No real prospects. That's not fine. That's concerning." My mother reached across the table and patted my hand. "We're just worried about you, sweetheart. You've always been so unfocused. Not like Jonathan. He's always known exactly what he wanted." The dinner continued in that vein for another hour. Every conversation circled back to Jonathan's achievements, my failures, and thinly veiled suggestions that I was wasting my potential. When dessert arrived, my father made a toast. "To Jonathan," he said, raising his glass. "The pride of the Whitfield family. May your success continue to grow." Everyone clinked glasses. No one toasted me. I drove home that night through the quiet streets of Chicago, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. The words echoed in my mind. Incompetent. No career. Unfocused. Back in my apartment, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. Financial reports glowed on the screen. Portfolio performance. Quarterly earnings. Investment summaries. $420 million. I had never told them. Never hinted. Never dropped a single clue. Because I wanted them to see me for who I truly was, not what I owned. But that night, staring at those numbers, I realized something had changed. I was tired of being invisible. 8 weeks later, the announcement came. The U.S. Department of Energy issued a request for proposals on a massive nationwide clean energy infrastructure project. The program aimed to modernize the electrical grid across 12 states, integrate renewable energy sources, and establish smart monitoring systems to reduce waste and improve efficiency. Total estimated value, $1.8 billion. It was the kind of project that only came along once in a generation, the type that could define careers and reshape entire industries. I read the announcement in my office, a discreet suite in a renovated warehouse building on the edge of downtown. The space was deliberately understated. No flashy signage, no corporate logos, just a brass plate beside the door that read Suite 412. My chief operating officer, James Reeves, knocked and entered carrying a thick folder. "You've seen it?" he asked. "Just now," I said. James had been with me for 6 years, one of the first people I hired when Apex Global started gaining traction. Former investment banker, sharp analytical mind, and completely loyal. He was one of only 3 people who knew my true identity. "This is perfect for us," James said, spreading documents across my desk. "We've got subsidiaries positioned in renewable energy, grid technology, AI monitoring systems. Our partnerships with European firms give us international credibility. Our track record is spotless." I studied the requirements carefully. The project would unfold in phases over 8 years. Competitive bidding. rigorous vetting process, public presentations to a federal review board. Whitfield Capital will go after this, I said quietly. James nodded. Guaranteed. Jonathan's been positioning for something like this for years. He's got political connections, media support, and your father's reputation backing him. I leaned back in my chair, thinking, for years, I had deliberately avoided any situation where I might cross paths with my family professionally. I operated in different sectors, different cities, different circles entirely. But this project was too significant to ignore. And something else had changed after that dinner. I was done hiding. Prepare our bid, I said. Full proposal. Everything we've got. James paused. You realize this means full disclosure, right? Federal contracts require complete transparency. Beneficial ownership. Principal officers. Your full legal name will be on every document. I nodded slowly. I know. For 11 years, I've hidden behind proxy structures and my middle name. But federal regulations don't allow that kind of anonymity. The application will require my full legal name, social security number, and complete ownership disclosure. Your family will find out, James said. Not until the presentation, I replied. The bidder list shows company names only. Apex Global Ventures means nothing to them. They won't know I'm involved until I walk into that room. James grinned. They're going to lose their minds when they see your name attached to this. I know, I said. That's the point. The next 6 weeks were intense. My team worked around the clock assembling the proposal. We brought in engineers, environmental consultants, financial analysts, and legal experts. Every detail was scrutinized, every projection triple-checked, every risk factor addressed with contingency plans. I insisted on transparency in every aspect. Clean documentation, verified partnerships, auditable financials. Unlike my brother, I had built my empire without cutting corners. During this time, I heard through industry contacts that Whitfield Capital was indeed pursuing the same project. Jonathan had assembled a high-profile team and was securing endorsements from prominent politicians. 2 days before the presentation, he began conducting media interviews about his vision for America's energy future. I watched one interview on my laptop that evening. The Whitfield name has always stood for excellence and innovation, he told the reporter confidently. This project represents the future, and we intend to lead the way. I smiled and closed my laptop. He had no idea what was coming. Later that evening, my mother called. Daniel, I'm sure you've seen the news coverage about Jonathan's energy project. Your father and I will be in Washington next week for his presentation. It's a very big deal. Will you be there? I paused. Yes, I'll be there. Oh, wonderful, she said, sounding genuinely pleased. It'll be nice to have the whole family together. Maybe we can have dinner afterward to celebrate Jonathan's success. Maybe, I said noncommittally. After I hung up, I stood at my office window overlooking the Chicago River. Snow had begun to fall, dusting the city in white. James appeared in the doorway. Everything's ready. Proposal is locked. Presentation is polished. We're good to go. Thank you, I said. Are you nervous? He asked. I considered the question. No. Excited. They're going to be shocked. I know. Your brother's going to lose it. Probably. James hesitated. Are you sure you want to do this? There's no going back once you step into that room. I turned to face him. I've been invisible my entire life, James. To my family, I'm a failure. A disappointment. Someone who needs saving. But you're not. No, I agreed. I'm not. It's time they knew that. December 14th, Washington, D.C. The federal building was an imposing structure of granite and glass in the heart of the Capitol. Security was tight. Credentials were checked multiple times. Media crews lingered outside, hoping to catch interviews with prominent bidders. I arrived alone, carrying a leather briefcase, dressed in a charcoal suit. Inside, the presentation hall was a modern auditorium with tiered seating and a massive screen at the front. The review panel sat at a long table on an elevated platform. Approximately 200 observers filled the seats, including industry analysts, journalists, and family members of the competing firms. I spotted my parents immediately. They sat in the third row, dressed impeccably, scanning the room with the casual confidence of people accustomed to being recognized. My mother wore a cream-colored suit. My father had his reading glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed program. Jonathan was backstage, preparing for Whitfield Capital's presentation. I took a seat in the back corner, deliberately out of their line of sight. The first 3 presentations were competent but unremarkable. Mid-sized firms with decent proposals but limited resources. Then came Whitfield Capital. Jonathan strode onto the stage with practiced confidence. He commanded the room immediately, his voice clear and authoritative as he outlined Whitfield Capital's vision. For 3 generations, the Whitfield name has represented integrity, innovation, and results, he began. Today, we bring that legacy to America's energy future. His presentation was polished. Slick graphics, impressive partnerships, political endorsements prominently displayed. My parents beamed from their seats. My mother actually wiped away a tear at one point. When Jonathan finished, the panel asked several questions, which he handled smoothly. As he exited the stage, the moderator glanced at the schedule. Next, we have Apex Global Ventures. I stood and made my way down the aisle. My father noticed me first. His brow furrowed in confusion. Why was Daniel walking toward the stage? Then my mother saw me. Her mouth fell open slightly. I stepped onto the platform and turned to face the audience. Good afternoon. My name is Daniel Carter Whitfield, and I'm the founder and CEO of Apex Global Ventures. The silence that followed was absolute. My father's face drained of color. My mother gripped the armrest of her seat. Somewhere in the back, I heard Jonathan's voice say, "What?" I proceeded with my presentation calmly and methodically. I outlined Apex Global's portfolio, $420 million in assets under management, holdings in renewable energy across North America and Europe, partnerships with leading technology firms in Germany, Japan, and South Korea, a proven track record of successful infrastructure projects in 12 countries. I displayed our financials, independently audited and verified. I showed case studies of previous projects we had completed on time and under budget. I presented letters of recommendation from international partners and government officials in 3 nations. Unlike Jonathan's presentation, which relied heavily on reputation and political connections, my presentation focused entirely on capability and results. The panel asked sharp, technical questions. I answered every single one with specific data and concrete evidence. When I finished, the room remained eerily quiet. I gathered my materials and walked off the stage. As I passed my parents' row, I made brief eye contact with my father. His expression was unreadable, shock mixed with something I couldn't quite identify. I exited through a side door before anyone could approach me. My phone began ringing before I even reached my hotel. 15 missed calls from my mother, 8 from my father, 23 text messages. I ignored them all. That evening, there was a knock on my hotel room door. I opened it to find my entire family standing in the hallway. "We need to talk," my father said, his voice tight and controlled. I stepped aside and let them in. My mother immediately began. "Daniel, what was that? Why didn't you tell us? How long have you been running a company?" 11 years, I said calmly. 11 years since I registered it, though it took the first 2 years before I made my breakthrough investment. Jonathan paced near the window, his face flushed. $420 million? That's impossible. You're lying. The financials are publicly verifiable, I said. Feel free to check. My father sat heavily in a chair. Why would you hide this from us? I looked at him directly. Because I wanted to build something on my own, without the Whitfield name, without your connections, without anyone assuming I succeeded because of who my father is. That's ridiculous, Jonathan snapped. Family supports family. We could have helped you. I didn't need help, I said. I needed to prove to myself that I could do it alone. My mother's eyes filled with tears. But we're your family. You should have trusted us. Trusted you, I repeated quietly. The same family that spent years calling me incompetent, unfocused, a failure. Silence. You made me feel invisible, I continued. Every family dinner, every conversation, every interaction was a reminder that I wasn't good enough, that I didn't measure up to Jonathan, that I was the disappointing son who couldn't find his way. We were worried about you, my mother protested. No, I said. You were embarrassed by me. There's a difference. My father's jaw tightened. This project, you're competing against your own brother. I'm competing for a federal contract, I corrected. The same as 30 other firms. Jonathan stepped forward. You need to withdraw your bid. I stared at him. Excuse me. You heard me. Withdraw. This project is critical for Whitfield Capital. We've been positioning for this for years. You can't just swoop in and undermine everything we've built. I'm not undermining anything, I said. I'm competing fairly. It's not fair, Jonathan shouted. You're using the Whitfield name without contributing anything to the family business. You're capitalizing on our reputation. Actually, I said calmly, I've deliberately kept my identity separate. I use my middle name in all business dealings. Apex Global Ventures has no public connection to Whitfield Capital. I built my reputation independently. My father stood. Daniel, be reasonable. Jonathan's right. This project could define his career. You don't need it. You've already proven yourself. Step aside. For the family. There it was. The same pattern that had played out my entire life. Sacrifice for Jonathan. Make room for Jonathan. Yield to Jonathan. No, I said quietly. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. What did you say? My father asked, his voice dangerously low. I said no. I'm not withdrawing. I earned my place in that competition. My proposal stands on its own merit. Jonathan's face turned red. You selfish bastard. Careful, I said, my voice still calm. You're the one demanding I sacrifice my work for your benefit. My mother tried a different approach. Daniel, sweetheart, please. Think about what this means for the family. If you and Jonathan are competing, it creates division. People will talk. It reflects poorly on all of us. Then maybe, I said slowly, the family should have thought about that before spending years making me feel worthless. My father's expression hardened. If you go through with this, there will be consequences, such as you'll be removed from the will, excluded from family events, cut off completely. I felt my heart pounding, but my voice remained steady. Then I guess that's your choice to make. You're choosing a contract over your family? My mother asked, tears streaming down her face. No, I said. I'm choosing self-respect over being treated as lesser. There's a difference. They left shortly after, the door closing behind them with a heavy finality. I stood alone in the hotel room, my hands trembling slightly. For the first time in my life, I had chosen myself. And it was terrifying and liberating. The fallout began immediately. By morning, I received a formal letter from my father's attorney. I had been removed from the family will, effective immediately. All trust fund distributions were terminated. I was no longer welcome at family gatherings, company events, or any function associated with the Whitfield name. My mother sent a brief text. I hope you're happy with your decision. I didn't respond. But Jonathan wasn't finished. Over the next 3 weeks, I began noticing unusual pressure on my business operations. Partners who had worked with Apex Global for years suddenly requested emergency reviews of our contracts. Suppliers delayed shipments. 2 banks that had provided credit lines initiated unexpected audits. James brought me the reports. This isn't coincidence. Someone's making calls. Jonathan, I said, has to be. He's got connections everywhere. He's pressuring anyone with ties to Apex Global. Then came the regulatory complaints. The Securities and Exchange Commission received an anonymous tip about potential irregularities in Apex Global's financial reporting. The Environmental Protection Agency got a complaint about one of our renewable energy projects. The Internal Revenue Service initiated a comprehensive audit. Each complaint was baseless, but each required time, resources, and legal fees to address. Jonathan was trying to bury me in bureaucratic warfare. I called an emergency meeting with my legal team. We cooperate fully with every investigation, I instructed. Complete transparency. Every document they request, we provide immediately. We have nothing to hide. My general counsel, Patricia Chun, nodded. This is going to be expensive and time-consuming. I know, but we're clean. Let them look. Over the next month, federal investigators combed through every aspect of Apex Global Ventures. They reviewed financial statements going back 11 years. They interviewed employees, partners, and vendors. They analyzed every transaction, every contract, every investment decision. It was invasive and exhausting, but they found nothing because every transaction was legitimate. However, during their investigation of Apex Global, the auditors began noticing irregularities in supporting documentation provided by third parties. Some of those third parties had connections to Whitfield Capital. Following standard procedure, they expanded their inquiry. And that's when things started to shift direction. Not toward me, but toward Jonathan. 2 weeks after our audit cleared, the first indication came from Patricia. She walked into my office on a Tuesday morning with an unusual expression. "The SEC investigators want to speak with you," she said. "Again?" I asked, tired of the endless interviews. "No, this time it's different. They want to ask you about Whitfield Capital." I looked up sharply. "What?" "Apparently, while reviewing your files, they found some discrepancies in documents that originated from Whitfield Capital's transactions. They're asking if you have any knowledge of your brother's business practices." I sat back in my chair. "I don't. I've been deliberately separate from their operations." That's what I told them. But they're digging now, and for what I'm hearing through back channels, they're finding things. Over the next 2 weeks, the story began to emerge. Whitfield Capital, it turned out, had been engaged in a sophisticated scheme of financial manipulation for at least 5 years. Offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Shell companies used to hide assets and evade taxes. Falsified appraisals on real estate transactions. Kickbacks to government officials for favorable zoning decisions. The evidence was extensive and damning, and Jonathan's fingerprints were all over it. 3 days after our audit cleared, federal agents raided Whitfield Capital's offices. They seized computers, files, and financial records. Employees were escorted out. News cameras captured everything. By that afternoon, the Wall Street Journal had broken the story with a front-page article. Whitfield Capital under federal investigation for fraud. The article detailed allegations of tax evasion, money laundering, and bribery. It named Jonathan specifically as the primary architect of the scheme. My phone exploded with calls from reporters, but I didn't answer any of them. I watched the coverage from my office, feeling a strange mix of emotions. I hadn't caused this. I hadn't reported Jonathan or provided evidence against him. The investigation had uncovered his crimes independently while trying to find dirt on me. He had dug his own grave. The indictment came in February. Jonathan Whitfield was charged with 14 counts of financial fraud, tax evasion, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit bribery. The evidence was overwhelming. Prosecutors had emails, financial records, recorded phone calls, and testimony from cooperating witnesses. My father hired the best defense attorneys in the country, but even they acknowledged the case was nearly impossible to win. The media frenzy was relentless. Golden Boy of Chicago, finance, faces decades in prison. Whitfield empire crumbles amid fraud scandal. Whitfield Capital's clients fled. Investors demanded their money back, but the firm's assets were frozen pending the outcome of the trial, leaving thousands of clients unable to access their funds. The company's reputation was destroyed overnight. My parents' social circle evaporated. Country club memberships were quietly revoked. Charity boards requested resignations. Invitations stopped arriving. The trial began in April of the following year. I didn't attend, but I followed the coverage. Day after day, prosecutors presented damning evidence. Financial experts testified about the sophisticated nature of the fraud. Former employees described Jonathan's direct involvement in creating false documents and hiding assets. My brother sat at the defense table, his expensive suit unable to hide the fact that he looked smaller somehow, diminished. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing was scheduled for 2 months later. My mother called me the night before Jonathan's sentencing hearing. It was the first time we'd spoken in over a year. "Daniel," she said, her voice hoarse from crying. "Please, you have to help your brother." "How?" I asked quietly. "You have money, influence. You could speak to someone. Make a statement to the judge about his character. Something." "Mom, he committed serious crimes. He made mistakes," she insisted. "Bad judgment. But he's not a criminal. He's your brother." I closed my eyes. What would you like me to say to the judge? That he tried to destroy my company? That he filed false complaints to bury me in investigations? That he used every connection he had to sabotage my business? Silence on the other end. He did those things, I said gently. And that was before we knew about the fraud, the tax evasion, the bribery. I can't defend actions I know were wrong. So you'll just let him go to prison? She asked, her voice breaking. I'm not sending him to prison, Mom. His choices did that. She hung up without saying goodbye. The sentencing hearing was held on a Wednesday morning. I didn't plan to attend, but at the last minute, I changed my mind. I sat in the back of the courtroom, unnoticed in the crowd of reporters and observers. The judge was a stern woman in her 60s who had a reputation for fairness and no tolerance for white-collar crime. She listened to the defense attorneys argue for leniency. They cited Jonathan's previously clean record, his contributions to the community, his family's reputation. Then she spoke. Mr. Whitfield, you were given every advantage in life. Education, opportunity, a respected family name. And you used those advantages to defraud investors, evade taxes, and corrupt public officials. You showed no remorse, no accountability, only entitlement. She sentenced him to 12 years in federal prison and ordered him to pay $43 million in restitution and fines, an amount he'd likely never be able to repay, but one that would follow him for the rest of his life. My mother collapsed in tears. My father sat motionless, his face carved from stone. Jonathan was led away in handcuffs. I left before anyone saw me. The months that followed were strange. Apex Global Ventures was awarded the primary contract for the renewable energy integration phase of the federal infrastructure project, valued at $640 million. It was the largest single award in the program, and our proposal had been rated highest in technical merit, financial stability, and proven capability. I threw myself into the work. My team expanded. We opened new offices, hired experts, began implementation. But the victory felt hollow somehow. I didn't speak to my parents. They didn't reach out to me beyond that one call before sentencing. Jonathan was transferred to a medium-security federal correctional facility in Pennsylvania. I received one letter from him, forwarded through his attorney. It was brief. This is your fault. You destroyed our family. I hope you're satisfied. No apology. No acknowledgement of his crimes. Just blame. I burned the letter. A year passed. Then, unexpectedly, my mother called. Daniel, she said, could we meet? Just you and me. We met at a quiet cafe in Lincoln Park, neutral territory where we wouldn't run into anyone we knew. She looked older, tired. Her hair had gone almost entirely gray. I've had a lot of time to think, she began. About everything. About how we treated you. About Jonathan. About the trial. I listened without interrupting. We were wrong, she said, her voice shaking. We favored Jonathan his entire life. We made excuses for him, protected him from consequences, and we dismissed you, constantly. She wiped her eyes with a napkin. I watched the trial every day, heard the evidence, listened to what he'd done, and I realized we created that. Your father and I, we taught him that rules didn't apply to him, that he deserved special treatment, that he could do whatever he wanted because he was special. Mom, I said gently, no, let me finish. We were terrible parents to you. We compared you to him constantly, made you feel inadequate, and you went out and built something extraordinary completely on your own, and we didn't even notice. Tears streamed down her face. I'm so sorry, Daniel. I'm so incredibly sorry. I felt my own eyes burning. I don't expect you to forgive us, she continued. I just needed you to know that I see it now. I see what we did, and I'm ashamed. We sat in silence for a long moment. I don't need you to be ashamed, I finally said. I need you to understand that I can't go back to being invisible. I won't accept being treated as less than. I know, she said, and you shouldn't. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, but it was a beginning. 2 years into Jonathan's sentence, my father asked if I would visit him in prison. He's asked to see you, my father said over the phone. He's different now. Changed. I hesitated. Different how? He's taking classes, working in the prison library. He's written your mother and me letters. Real letters, not blame. He wants to apologize to you in person. I agreed, though I wasn't sure why. The medium security federal facility was in Pennsylvania, surrounded by chain-link fences and guard towers. The visiting room was a large space with tables and plastic chairs. Inmates wore khaki uniforms. Guards watched from the corners. Jonathan walked in looking nothing like the man I remembered. He lost weight. His hair was shorter. There was something quieter about him, less of the aggressive confidence that had defined him. We sat across from each other. "Thank you for coming," he said. I nodded. "I've had a lot of time to think," he continued. "About everything. About what I did. How I treated you. How I treated everyone." He looked down at his hands. I was so used to being the favorite, to having everything handed to me, that I thought I deserved it. I thought success was my birthright. And when you showed up at that presentation, when I saw what you'd built without any help, it terrified me. "Why?" I asked. "Because it proved that I hadn't earned anything. That everything I had was because of Dad's name and Mom's connections. You build a real company with real value. I just play pretend with other people's money." He met my eyes. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just want you to know that I finally understand. You were right to compete, right to refuse to back down. And I'm sorry for trying to destroy you." We talked for another hour. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was honest. When I left, I felt lighter somehow. 3 years after that first presentation in Washington, I stood in a different conference room. This one was smaller, warmer. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Lake Michigan. My parents sat on one side of the table. My father had retired from public life. My mother had started volunteering with organizations that helped formerly incarcerated people reintegrate into society. "We want to talk to you about something," my father said. They looked nervous. "We'd like to be part of your life again," my mother said. "Not as we were before, but as real family. Equal, respectful. No comparisons," my father added. "No favoritism. No expectations beyond what any parent should have. That you're happy and healthy." I considered their words carefully. "I need boundaries," I said. "Clear ones." "Of course," my mother said. "I won't discuss my business in detail. I won't accept unsolicited advice. And I need to know that you see me for who I am, not who you wanted me to be." "We do," my father said. "We see you, Daniel." Finally, I looked at them for a long moment. These were the people who had raised me, who had hurt me, and who were now genuinely trying to change. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't about forgetting. It was about choosing whether the past would continue to control the present. We started slowly. Monthly dinners, brief phone calls, gradual steps toward rebuilding trust. It wasn't the family I'd once hoped for, but it was real. And real, I had learned, was more valuable than perfect. Jonathan was released after serving 8 years. He moved to a small town in Oregon, took a job as an accountant at a nonprofit, and kept his head down. We exchanged emails occasionally. Brief, polite updates. He never asked for money or favors, and I never offered them without being asked. Apex Global Ventures continued to grow. We completed the federal energy project ahead of schedule and under budget. New opportunities emerged. New partnerships formed. But I learned something important during those years. Success means nothing if you're invisible to yourself. For too long, I let my family's perception define my worth. I had hidden my achievements, seeking some form of validation that would never come in the way I imagined. The real victory wasn't the $420 million. It wasn't winning the federal contract. It wasn't watching my brother face consequences. The real victory was the moment I chose self-respect over approval. The moment I walked out of that hotel room after refusing to yield. The moment I stopped being invisible. That was when I truly became successful. Not when others finally saw me, but when I finally saw myself. All right, let's settle this in the comments. Was Daniel right to compete against his own brother, or should family always come first? Was he selfish, or were his parents selfish for demanding he sacrifice his success for Jonathan's ego? I want to hear both sides. And here's the real question. Would you have burned that letter from prison, or would you have written back? Drop your honest answer below. If this story had you picking side from Chapter 1, smash that like button and subscribe to the Payback Chronicles. We drop the most satisfying revenge stories where the underestimated become unstoppable. New stories every week. See you in the next one.